Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is with Public Officials, and my name is Kathy Benuck. Well, today it is January 31st, 2013. Hard to believe. I don't know where the month is gone. In a little more than 5 weeks, Bedford voters are once again going to the polls for the March 12th town election. And of course, as usual, we'll have two sides of the ballot, the town side and the school side. And we'll be voting on the school budget, as usual. And on the school side of things, there are several warrant articles, most notably that one which deals with the pay raise for the teachers again this year. And that is really going to be the focus of our show today. Now, I have three guests with me, and you'll be hearing from all of them today. Cindy Chagnon, who is on the school board, Bedford School Board, Scott Earnshaw, also on the Bedford School Board, and Nate Fellman, who is president of the Bedford Education Association. And one of the things I do want to stress to people is it is a professional organization, the Bedford Teachers Association. It's not a union. And a lot of people sometimes think that it is and wonder, boy, are those unions trying to pull something over on us? It's not. It's a professional association. Now, before we really get into the subject, I'm going to give you the total Reader's Digest version of the background. And we did do a show on this subject last year when it first kind of came up for public inspection. And you can go back on websites and such and watch that show if you want to refresh your memory. But the subject of teacher pay raises obviously was kind of volatile for a couple of years here in Bedford. And we had a couple of elections where the voters did indeed vote it down, and much to the disappointment and understandable chagrin of the Bedford teachers. Did this mean that Bedford residents or taxpayers or parents were dissatisfied with the teachers? I would say no, absolutely not. I think it was, just a situation where we had an economy that seemed to be in a horrible slide. There were some folks losing their jobs or maybe getting their hours of benefits caught. And, truth be told, a lot of people still were suffering sticker shock because we did have a couple of years where our taxes did kind of zoom up a little bit. So I don't think it was any disrespect for the teachers or any dissatisfaction. They were, I guess you'd say, victims of the crazy economy that was surrounding all of us. Was there any other thinking going on? Yeah, I think if we're all honest, we would have to say yeah. There were people who would get a little riled up when they would hear comparisons of what Bedford teachers might be paid compared to another town, because they would say, well, I don't live in that town, so don't tell me about it. I suppose a natural reaction. And then there were people who would get a little upset when they'd hear that possibly Bedford teachers would leave to go to another community, and people's reaction to that would be sometimes, well, so what? And again, no disrespect to the teachers, but I think there were emotions on both sides, and they had to kind of tamp down a little bit. So finally, I think the school board, the teachers, the voters all recognized, the Mexican standoff could not go on forever, and that maybe something new had to be approached, and that happened. The school board worked very, very hard with the teachers to try to come to something that voters could say, okay, this sounds reasonable. Palatable, excuse me. And they did wind up posing something different to voters in 2012 for the 2013 fiscal year. And that was a plan that was going to focus more on kind of with the younger and newer teachers getting their salaries up into more of a living wage. Because truth be told, when some of the younger teachers are earning $32,000, $33,000, $34,000 a year and might have families, almost impossible to live on in this economy. And the other part of it was that they were going to shift, and the teachers went along with this, shift some of the very expensive costs of health insurance to the teachers and a little bit away from the taxpayers. So again, a lot of give and take on every end. So the end result was voters did approve the contract, and everything went merrily along. The problem now, of course, is it was only a one-year contract. So here we are again facing an election, and voters are going to be asked to approve a new contract. The proposed school operating budget for fiscal year 24 is, and I'll make sure I get it right, $61,859,142, an increase a bit over last year. if it's passed, it will represent a tax increase of 52 cents. Now, what we're talking about tonight does not represent 52 cents. What we're talking about is strictly dealing with the agreements that we've started with the teachers, and that will account for 21 cents of the tax increase. Now, for those of you who are sitting there going, and is that all they're going to talk about tonight? But next week, I will be taping a show with the school superintendent, Tim Mays, and on that show, we'll kind of get into all the rest of the budget and hopefully answer any questions people might have on that. So, having said all that, welcome to all of you. I can't believe it's a year. You weren't here at the last one, but both of you were, and I can't believe a year has passed. Because it really was just about almost exactly. Yes.
It has.
Yes.
Although Nate and Cindy and I have sat together for each of the last 3 years. And as you mentioned in that introduction, this is a 2-year agreement, and we are very hopeful that we are not sitting down together again next year on these issues.
Yes.
Now, would you believe me if I told you you both look younger, or do you figure I'm just kind of bringing you down a path here?
I didn't realize your eyes were going that bad.
I know. Well, yeah, they are. You notice the glasses, you know, and it's time for a prescription renewal here. Now, as I said, I kind of gave the Reader's Digest version. So, I don't know. I mean, do you think, again, because a year ago was a long time ago, and people's memories are short, everybody's getting deluged with information all the time. Do you think it might be good to maybe start out kind of giving a little background on last year so people understand, you know, exactly what the changes were and such?
I think everything we talk about tonight is going to be you'll recognize as a continuation from last year, because it really is also a roadmap for what we're going to go doing in future years. It's not a new leadership over there. It's not new leadership on our side. I think that we have a common shared view of what we're trying to accomplish, and I think it's a perfectly appropriate question. So, we're talking about a 2-year contract. What's going to happen at the what do we forecast for future years? Right. Because I think if drawing the lines, connect the dots, you can see a pretty good indication of where we think things ought to go.
Okay.
So I think you'll see, as we talk about each of the primary issues tonight, there'll be reflections back to last year, and we might even start with that. With looking at some of the, I know you noticed that there are some people didn't want to see our comparisons with our neighbors, those numbers, and I certainly agree that those are just data points. Those are contexts. They're not the decision making. Bedford is always unique.
But they're contexts that need to be looked at. Certainly, you can't ignore them.
And so, one of the contexts that we might start with is just who are our teachers. What are some of the demographics there, and one of the elements to look at. And we'll try to keep down the slides to 10 or 15.
That's all?
That's all.
That's going to be a record for you people. No, seriously, I watch your school board meetings on TV, and that's going to be a record, 10, 15.
Only hit 10 or 15?
Yeah,
it is a record.
It is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I brought 31.
Did your machinery break down over
I
there?
brought 31 with me.
Or?
I brought 31 with me, but we're only going to use half of them.
Yeah.
So we have the school's a very technological district, and we have the little first graders making things and the PowerPoints and all this kind of stuff. So we have to reflect the technology that's involved in our children's education.
But it's embarrassing, though. I mean, seriously, because I'm a Luddite, and I barely can, use a cell phone. In fact, most of the time I don't even have it in my purse, seriously. So when I see these little kids sitting there like this, it's embarrassing. It's humiliating.
They're
really
amazing.
So we're going to start with this slide 2 and just put that briefly up for people to see. And you'll notice there that, I'm going to show you what we're looking at here. 2/3 of our teachers, or actually more than that, closing in on 70% have master's degrees. Of course, all the balance of them do have bachelor degrees, or most of them do.
Than masters.
That's correct. That's correct. And if you go even to the next slide, you'll see that in addition to education, the experience level of our staff is significant. Whereas back in 2009, you see you see the progression over time. As the over 15 years of experience, we're now exceeding 30% of our staff.
Yeah, you have a lot of teachers that are teaching second generation.
That's right. That's right. And we're going to quickly go one more slide, go over, all the way over to 12, and start looking at, you talked about what we did last year. And you know, one of the things that Nate and Cindy and I talked about last year when we got together is not only were we getting behind, or not only were we behind, we were getting further behind our peer districts. And
now explain to people who are listening.
Yes.
Who, you know, when they hear, because I mean, I know what you're talking about, and you all know what you're talking about, but I'm sure there's somebody out there going, okay, what do they mean by peer district? Right,
and in fact, we spent a lot of time discussing amongst ourselves the best way to define peer districts.
I'm sure.
And there are two groups of districts we always look at. One group of districts are the districts out there that have the best educational results in the state. Okay. Whether they're in the south or the north, doesn't matter.
And we're in that list.
We are always we're not only in that list, we're at the top of that list consistently. And secondly, we look at this southern tier. Who are our geographic competitors? Who are the ones closest by? We look at Merrimack, we look at Nashua, we look at Manchester. So we have an idea. So we understand that some of them are different from us demographically. They don't have the same community composition, they don't have the same size necessarily. So there may be differences, but we start with those two different groups, and we look at both of them because that's useful to do. So in this slide, which we'll look at for a minute on 12, this gives you an indication of the progress we made last year. Last year, the town put a lot of money into the teacher's salary. And that money is demonstrated by the green. You see, this is how we're ahead of some of the other districts. Now, the district, for example, we're most ahead of maybe is Merrimack, and I'm not holding that up as an example of where we want to be. I think they're not paying their, they're not being very competitive there. But you see, we're still far behind a number of other of our peer districts.
I think on this slide, one of the important things to note too is we're going to talk again this year about targeting salaries to where they're most needed. And this shows, to speak to last year's contract, about where we targeted salaries. We said we need to be able to hire teachers. That was one of our shared visions and shared goals. And this is for that teacher that has a bachelor's degree right out of college, no experience. And this shows that we were able to in large measure, accomplish that goal of raising our entry-level salary so that we're more competitive in the hiring of our brand new teachers. And so what this slide highlights is that the work that we did last year and the vote that the town made last year, it accomplished some good, which is I think.
And I mean, truth be told, too, I'm sure you want to attract the best of the new graduates, not the folks that will wind up anywhere who'll ever hire them.
That's correct.
Right.
We want first-tier candidates.
Well, yeah, makes sense.
And if we don't have to put the next slides up necessarily. You can put that, but the other slides we're going to look at in terms of other districts, or rather, in this case, it's bachelor's plus 5 years experience. So we're looking at somebody with a bit more experience than the last slide we looked at, and you'll notice there's a lot more red on this slide. There's a lot more area where we're behind. And further behind our peers. If you go right to the next slide, you'll see the same thing for a bachelor plus 10 years of experience, that you've still got far more red than we had in the very early entry-level bachelor plus 0 years of experience. So these slides are just showing us where we've got work to do, and why we will still stay focused on targeting our salaries, not just all teachers, but to those teachers that are furthest behind.
And I think you did manage to get that across last year. That was a major goal. I mean, the teachers who had been around and might have been at the top of the salary scale were not going to see great big pay raises. Not that anybody saw great big pay raises, but I mean,
that's right.
They weren't going to see the same as the younger teachers who were more in need.
That's exactly right.
And that's the same work that we went and tried to do again this time around. So targeting those salaries.
And whereas last year we targeted at the beginning of the salary, now we're targeted in the middle of the salary. And so if we ended on slide 18, you'll see here's another area where we're already relatively competitive, and we're not targeting the salary, the increases to this part of it.
And that's the
20 years.
More experience.
This is more experience.
Yeah,
this is master's plus 20. And that's just part of the reality. And that's it's why it's important to work as a group so that we're assessing each part of the pay scale, of each range, and make sure we're competitive.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Bedford teachers do not get automatic longevity pay raises, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
There aren't step increases automatically.
Right. Okay.
So any increase comes from the vote on the warrant article.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure.
Right. So that's an important point. So if we want to be competitive with our peers, we have to first come to the town and say, let's give everybody their step increase over last year, just to stay even with the other communities. And then we have to go back and say, okay, now we want to bring our overall schedule up, so some of those spots are more competitive. And so you'll see we're doing both of those things this year.
And I think a note on targeting and step increases is also that step increases aren't forever. There's a place at which you reach top step.
That's top,
and I think that's an important thing for the community to know, that this isn't every teacher gets a raise every year. You know, that's sort of a misconception. This is step increases, trying to keep our salary schedule competitive for hiring and retention. But there is a place at which we've coined a term, career rate, where you hit the top of that salary schedule and you're not seeing increases after that point.
Right.
Well, I think too, another thing that I mean, if we're going to be reasonable voters, you know, and not just look at the dollar figures, I mean, obviously, you know, the salary thing is important, and the competitive, you know, aspect of it is certainly a major factor. But above and beyond that, I mean, obviously, a teacher who has a good record, who has success, and so many of our teachers have been recognized, you know, for particular things that they've done. They've been recognized statewide and such, that other school systems, it doesn't mean they're out hunting for a job, but I mean, certainly would not have difficulty when school systems do have openings, obtaining some of those jobs. And I mean, to my way of thinking, every employer invests a lot of time and a lot of money in training people.
Yeah, we said that we didn't.
It would not make sense for us to have that investment and get them all up to, you know, 100% speed.
Oh, exactly. We spend so much, I mean, so much time and effort, and the administration, the principals, the vice principals, the deans, they work so much with the new teachers and with every teacher, but tremendous amount of work is done to help them learn all the aspects of teaching, to become the excellent teachers, so that every child is achieving. And someone said we shouldn't be the farm league training, you know, like training for the Red Sox or something, when you learn all these things, because we, like Nate said, we have gotten a little bit more competitive at the beginning, but then that 5-year teacher, that 7-year teacher, that 10-year teacher that many districts would be thrilled to have with all the training they received in Bedford, we don't want our investment to walk out the door because we are just not, you know,
penny wise, pound
and they
foolish.
have, you know, they may love Bedford, but as they get a little older, they have children that are thinking about college and all these other things, and they need to go where they can, you know.
Especially in this economy. I mean, people have to earn what they can earn.
So it's really an investment.
No matter how much you love your job, you still have to.
We want to keep our investment here. Certainly.
Yeah, and I'll be frank with you. I mean, I was kind of shocked last year, and I know I mentioned it in the show. To probably a few people's chagrin on occasion, and very rare, not once this year, I would sub. And I'll tell you, you know, I mean, I had never had classroom experience. I'm not a teacher. I wasn't trained as a teacher. And I mean, I kind of thought it would be challenging and fun, but I didn't think it would be so exhausting. I mean, I said on the show last year, you know, the days that I did it, I'd want to come home, put my feet up, and have a glass of wine. It was like, whoa, you know, and these people do this every day. And I mean, when I saw, particularly what the younger teachers were getting for a paycheck, I was like, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it for that. Because they do work hard. I mean, it's not the type of job that, you know, you feel like a coffee break and you need to run outside for 5 minutes of air, you can do it. You know, you can't say to the kids, see you in 10.
And the amount of time a teacher is in a classroom with the students is only a very small component of their teaching.
I know that,
You know, it's all the preparation and it's all of the continual development of learning, you know, enriching their skills and learning new things and grading and talking to parents, and it's just a tremendous amount. It's really a year long, and they work all summer many times, and you know, technology institutes and just other things, and preparing for the year. So it's a very all-encompassing job.
Yeah, it is. It's not the type of job you can just kind of sleepwalk, you know, stay out late the night before and kind of show up in the morning. I mean, you do have to deliver every day.
Yeah.
And if you don't deliver, if nothing else, you're going to have chaos in the classroom for openness.
I think two of the things that we touched on are the professional development that we do provide in Bedford is it can be that double-edged, we don't want to train them in the lead, but it is also a draw. So I think when we look at compensation, we have a system where we've got great supports here in Bedford for new teachers, and when they come in, because there is a more competitive entry rate, we were able to do that last year, and we get a teacher come in for that first 5 years of their career and get all this great professional development and learn all the things that they can go into a job interview somewhere else, and they're speaking the language that every other district wants to hear out of their young teachers, and that's when they're marketable. So then, again, targeting those salaries to retaining those teachers that we've done this great training on is this sort of next logical step that we've taken with this next contract. So.
Right.
Yeah, and that does make sense. And I think those are important points that maybe got lost during some of the emotional debates.
You're right.
Because, you know, I mean, you know, these did get kind of emotional for a while.
Nate wants to talk, too, about the risk shift with the insurance.
Yeah, that, I had this on my list.
And that's a continuation of an issue we worked on closely with last year. And I think you're looking at slide 24 on that.
Yeah, I'm going to actually just pull this up, because when we talk about that continuation of the work that we did, this is another significant area where we sat down and looked at sat with the board and looked at the issue of insurances. We've come to a common agreement where we can't just focus on salaries. We can't say we need more competitive salaries unless we're going to be willing to do the same analysis on the side of the insurance. And so when we looked at insurances once again this year, we see that Bedford actually has a very nice health benefit package that they offer their employees. So we wanted to look at, well, where are we going to spend dollars? Are we going to spend them in salary, or are we going to spend them in insurance? And we understand that, I think as a group, that a dollar is a dollar, whether you're putting it towards health insurance or where you're putting it towards salary. So this kind of gives you a good graphic up on the slide about what we've done over the course of the last two contracts, the one that passed last year and then also the proposed 2-year contract that we're going to put before voters this March. And if you look at the family plan, I'm going to highlight that one first because it's the most expensive plan. What we began last year was differentiating among the plans. So it used to be that whether you took a single person plan or a family plan, you paid the same percentage. And last year we took a 6% additional shift in the family plan.
I remember that.
Because we recognize that that's the most expensive plan. So again, a dollar here is a dollar here, or it's a dollar in salary. And we said, we'd rather have those dollars in salary where it's equal for all employees, rather than in benefits where there's a disparity between whether you have a family plan, you elect for that, or you elect for a single plan. We've continued that work again this year. So when you look at the blue line, that shows you where we were at in 2011 before the last contract. And it shows you where we increased to on the red line in that contract.
Increased to, now you're talking about the teacher responsibility.
The teacher responsibility. Thank you.
All right.
And then when you look at the yellow or orangish line there, you're going to see what it would be next year with no new contract if the contract doesn't pass. And then the green line is where it will be when the contract passes, or if the contract passes. And the thing.
Can I interrupt you? Ask you a question? Say the contract did not pass this year, then everything reverts back to the old system with the insurance and such?
The percentages would stay the same. So the additional shift that the family plan has taken on in this new deal is an additional 3%. So that's on top of the 6% that we took on last year. Which
it is going up this year?
Yes. Absolutely.
We have an understanding that there's not going to be substantial increases in salary unless there are equivalent, appropriate, reciprocal increases in risk shift.
Because I don't think a lot of people realized that that was also going up.
No,
I
it's
think they thought it
additional
was staying
3%.
part of last,
and that whole 3% will be shifted to the teacher in the first year.
In the first year. So it'll be 3% over 2 years, but it'll all happen in the first year.
For the family plan.
For the family
plan.
1% for the single, 2% for the two-person.
Right.
And again, continuing that work of differentiating where the most expensive plans actually are going to have the higher percentage pay on the part of the employee, because that's all that makes sense, really.
Well, yeah, because their policy is so much more expensive, than for a single person, obviously.
So when you look at the cumulative effect of these two agreements that really this team has worked on, and I think it was an excellent point that Scott made, that we've had the same people in the room working on these, looking at these issues, coming to common ground on the different things that we face as a district, and coming to great solutions. And you can see an over doubling of what the teacher contribution has been in that family plan, and then appropriate increases in both the two-person and the single plan. Again, to keep people who make those salaries and elect those insurance plans competitive with their peers. Because you don't want a situation where the person with the single plan is not as competitive, so jumps to another district.
Sure.
Whereas if you have a family plan, you are competitive. So
now, if my memory serves me correctly, in addition to the teacher portion of the insurance payment getting higher, did you not also take on more responsibility for co-pays and prescription costs as well?
In last year's plan, we doubled the co-pays for office visits, and also restructured our prescription co-payments such that it actually brought the cost of our overall plans down because of the decisions we decided.
And we have some of the lowest insurance costs of any school district in the southern tier.
That's how it worked out? Really?
Right. In part that's because we've chosen collectively some of the cheaper plans, and in part that's worked out because our professionals are careful about their health. You know, I think there's some self-selection there. You can see, he mentioned they've doubled, and they doubled the insurance cost for the teachers on the family plan was actually last year, and they're at another $1,000 up this year. So it's a $2,000 or a tripling over the course of those 3 years.
That's their out-of-pocket cost?
Yes.
Really?
Right. So that's the amount, and so that's the amount that they're paying. But the key there is that also represents what percentage of the risk they're assuming, because they understand that this is what they're paying for this year, but next year nobody knows what the rates are going to be.
Right.
They just know what their percentage is going to be.
I mean, none of us can control what insurance companies.
So when we talk about risk shift, we're not just talking about dollar shift. We're talking about what are the percentages that they're willing to take responsibility for, and that's the real difference that's come up.
Yeah, that could be the wild card.
Yes, that's right.
Legitimately.
Yeah, this year we're fortunate to have a very small, you notice the orange line is just a little bit above the red line there, and I think it's a guaranteed maximum rate of 6.5%. I think we're very fortunate this year that it's not going up, but other years when it may jump up, they will be taking off the fact that they've been willing to take on a much larger percentage of the risk is going to benefit the taxpayers a lot.
That's right.
Now, I had a question. I know that the new contract, the proposed contract, is being called a Sanbornized contract. What exactly do you mean by Sanbornized?
Well, 99% of the school districts in the state do it this way. And it's just a term that Sanborn, New Hampshire was one of the first districts, so it got coined. It comes from Sanborn. And all it means
kind of reminded me like
it's
pasteurized or something.
It's actually, if you think, the police and the fire and this type thing, once a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract is voted on by the voters and passed, then that contract, the salaries for those 2 years or sometimes 3 years with the fire and the police and thing is guaranteed. You've passed it and you've taken care of it for several years. So the Sanborn
only refers to where it all started.
Exactly.
Wild.
Yeah, in the past, Bedford, like I say, have been part of the 1% of the state that didn't do it that way. In the past, we would pass a 3-year contract, but then every single year we would vote, the voters would vote on the salary increase for that year. There was no certainty for the faculty. I mean, they knew we're supposed to get this, but we don't really know, and there was so much uncertainty, and they said, once you pass a contract, it should be the contract. And so if this one passes, this year, we know what it's going to be, and then next year it goes into the budget.
So we would not have to vote on it again.
You would not vote again on it next year. It would be part of the budget next year.
It'll be part of the default budget.
Yeah, and part of the default. You know, it goes in. It goes into next year's expenditure.
So now, is that,
the
do
town
most
still
school
approves
districts do it that way or not?
What's that?
Most school districts.
99% of the state
Really?
does it this way.
I think one of the things Cindy said was a very good point, which about certainty. And I think it's certainty not only for the teachers, but for the district,
Exactly.
for the taxpayer, for the voter.
Well, yeah.
And what it does is it allows this relationship that we've built at the negotiating table to focus on something other than negotiations. Because if we're in there and we have a 2-year deal passed, we can focus all of this professional conversation on the great work that we're doing with professional development, the new curriculum that we want to develop, and how we want to move forward with that. Not that we don't focus on that as well.
No,
already,
but this whole pay raise issue and everything certainly took up everybody's time.
We spend months and months on negotiations, and like Nate says, there's so many. It's very important, but there's really exciting things with the staff development and with curriculum. I'm on all these, and with all this other kind of stuff and technology.
And frankly, the deals we cut are, you can't isolate one year from the next year. It's a comprehensive deal, and so we can't expect to have a good consensus on those points unless we can speak for the town and have it passed in one vote for both years. And that's what we propose. That's what the other school districts do. It makes sense for us to do it that way as well.
Now, with this one, as we say, if it passes, and I mean, since this, we've already got a history with this, and you were able to show cost savings and such. I mean, I'm kind of thinking that you're not like extraordinarily worried that the voters would reject it this year. So going on the assumption that they'll vote for it, and we know we're all set for this year and next year, where do you see all of this going in the future with future contract negotiations, or is it too far out to even think about yet?
I want to make sure we get this one passed.
Well, yeah,
I also want to supplement that. I don't want to take for granted this year.
Yeah.
There are people in our town, a lot of us in our town, who are very sensitive to tax increases.
Yes, yes.
I am one of those, and I think we have taxpayers well represented on the school board, but it is a difficult choice to propose any tax increase in current economic circumstances. I'm sure there are people who will vote against it, and I'm sure there are people who will vote for it.
Well, are you able to counter? And I don't know if this is a stretch, because I mean, again, I'm not a budget writer. Are you able to, like, at this point in time, be able to say to somebody, well, why should I vote for it? You're asking me for 2 years and all of this.
Right.
Are you able to show, like in an easy way, with a chart or something, the actual dollar value to people of them voting for the 2-year?
Oh, sure.
We have that, absolutely.
Because that's probably what you're going to have to work at the most, I would think.
I think what you're asking is sort of the tax rate, but also what's the impact on a $250,000 home?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what people talk. Yeah,
I think we have that slide that we should have just. Is it
number 11?
That's right.
Yeah, there it is.
Got it. So you can see here that so for the 2-year agreement in the first year, the tax impact would be on a $250,000 home, $53. $350,000.
So that would have been this coming year.
This coming contract. If this coming contract passes, then if you've got that $500,000 home, you're paying $104 extra for the teacher's contract. Okay, so that's the delta.
Now, are you able to show us that if the contract didn't pass, and we went back to the old way, with the full responsibility, more responsibility for the insurance and so on?
That I don't.
Is that something that we can point to and say, but if you don't pass this contract, here's your alternative, which isn't too good?
They're taking the 3% increase in insurance over a long period of time. We'll make much, if not all of that back. But it's not. That's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, I think you said 5 years. Wasn't it last year? Did it be like a 5-year?
For last year, we had a specific time frame because it was a 6%, and there was
so it'd be shorter now?
No, it'll be
Well,
longer.
Oh, a little longer. Okay.
It'll be longer now because we're only doing 3% shift this year.
Okay.
The healthcare cost that will be with the assumed risk that the teachers are taking this year is about $112,000. So that's right.
That's correct.
Yeah, my glasses on. I have to make sure the young eyes.
I know when you
don't
look at numbers, it's crazy.
So you'd have to add 112,000 back in. In other words, Scott. That's what we would not be saving. As far as the risk shift, she was asking the difference.
Yeah,
we don't have
I think I
don't
posed
have
my
a chart
question
like
badly.
that, but I just know that the district is saving $112,000 on insurance risk shift with that. Now, as far as taxing, we don't know that
So to
yet.
go backwards
net
to the
effect.
old, it's going to wind up costing us more in the long run.
I think the key point there, what you picked up on there, is to go back to the shift in risk. These are ever increasing costs.
Yeah.
So when you take additional percentage on as the employee, that insulates then the district from facing those costs as insurances rise. So there will be a payback period. We haven't calculated it's of this saving the district money over time. The shortest answer to what will happen if the contract gets voted down is this increase of, say, a $500,000 home of $104 won't happen.
Right.
That would be so it's.
You'll save $104.
You'll save it costs $104 to pass the agreement. You would not incur that cost if it does not.
But we'd have an increased cost, though, for the insurance.
Right. Because we wouldn't have the additional risk shift.
No,
it wouldn't equal that.
That's all calculated into it. So this is the net increase is the 104.
Okay.
And if we project future increases in health insurance costs, which I think will be the case, then we could talk about how long it'll take, whether it's 10 or 15 years before that money to come back. So part of this is an investment on the health insurance risk shift side.
Okay.
But the primary reason for this contract is for us to have competitive teacher salaries. So we're able to retain that the well-trained, educated, mid-level teacher.
But we're talking the 104 figure for a $500,000 house.
That's correct.
And I think isn't the average for Bedford considered $300,000?
Yeah.
So
okay, then that's
obviously tons of people aren't going to be anywhere near the 104.
So if you had $350,000, you'll get $74. Right.
Which, I mean, in the overall scheme of things, I don't think is going to set anybody historical.
We do too.
I mean, I don't. Maybe they will, but I wouldn't think.
We have some slides in here too. We've talked about like the Bedford is like Forbes magazine said, it's the best bang for your buck around because we have a very economical school district, and we are our cost per pupil compared to almost anybody is.
I wanted to ask you about that because I know that when in all your various. You guys love charts and graphs.
He's getting you
I'm
one.
not guaranteeing it's going to be shown. I'm just queuing it up.
But I know that when you do look at both the state average and at some of the peer districts, both geographical and the other factors that weigh in, that we are coming in lower than a whole lot of them. And how did we manage that? Because, I mean, as you well know, there are critics in town who go, oh, the Taj Mahal of a high school, or, oh, they think it's all private schools.
The Taj Mahal of a high school.
Oh, yeah, you hear that in town. You know that. I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard. Or people think, that, oh, they think they're so wonderful. Yeah, I mean, you know this. You know there's that thought. I'm not saying everybody. I'm saying there's an element.
It's important to recognize that we get good value.
I know that.
When we built that high school.
But my question is, how did it work out?
Yeah, how come we get so much lower
that we
rates?
are coming in lower than other school districts that don't have the high rating or the test scores that our kids are getting? And
well, there's
all
many.
That good stuff.
There's many different reasons, and we can we'll talk about different ones. Our staffing levels are very low. We are the 9th, I think, lowest. I mean, not lowest, highest number of students per teacher in the state. The 9th of 160. Yeah.
Really?
Because that is people throw around numbers.
Oh, I know they do.
But the state calculates it with all your classroom teachers, your phys ed, your art, your music, the special ed teachers, and a lot of these others like that, the tech ed, all these types, all of those, they calculate that with the number of students. And so they come out with something like 14 students per teacher. But that's not what we have in our classrooms.
No. No, I know
because
that.
the music teacher takes around this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we stick around our standards, which is 20 plus or minus 1 or 2 up through the 4th grade, and then 25 above that. And we don't, a few people talk about, oh, these classes of 4 and 5. No, but and Scott, you want to talk about something?
Well, I mean, occasionally there might be a class that's not full, but I wouldn't think that's the overall rule.
There are classes that aren't full. That's true.
In high school,
but the key, I think, is that if we were out of line, if we had really small classes, then how can we be the 9th from the bottom in size? We're 9th at 161. So there's almost nobody with that has larger classes than us. That doesn't make sense, and the reason for that is we've talked about.
Well, maybe Manchester, because it's chaotic over there these
days. If you look at slide 9, I think the only one there we see Concord is one of the few that has higher ratios than we do. But almost everybody else has, obviously if we're 9th at 161, almost everybody else has smaller classes than we do. And why is that? Because we run our district efficiently. It's lean and mean. When we hire special education, so that a lot of the teachers, the teaching professionals who don't have classes, are because they're involved in special education. That's a requirement of...
Well, that's a huge cost driver, special education.
Sure,
I was kind of shocked when I saw the numbers.
But it's not only a cost driver, it's also a pupil, student, teacher driver, because we have to include those. The state includes that in the formula. So if you backed all those out, you get back to the 2025 that Cindy was talking about. So that's one of our cost drivers. One of the ones we already mentioned was health insurance. Our teachers are young and healthy, or they're middle-aged and healthy, or they're old and healthy, but they're healthy. And so our costs, we've been able to keep them low.
And also, we've been very sensitive with some of the lower grades. Some of the numbers have dropped. And Tim has been very sensitive to that. We have 22 less teachers than we did just 2 years ago.
22 full?
Wow. 22, less full-time teachers. He's restructured or reassigned some administrative things. We used to have like special ed coordinators for each school. He made that one of the assistant principal's responsibilities. He's tried to be very sensitive to this to make sure that we adequately have all the administrative levels and the teacher levels covered, but that we don't just keep teachers as, you have some smaller class sizes in some buildings. He's been very on top of that. And
we have a disciplined approach to keeping to the numerical targets. That's how you ought to run a business, and that's how Tim runs the district, and that's an important aspect. The other aspect, the reason why we run more cheaply or more efficiently than other districts is we don't overpay our teachers. We have a good environment to work in. We try to have a competitive pay, but we're behind in compensation, and we're working to get up there. But if you look at the averages, that's where we are. We're about average.
I think that picks up on a point that I think you had a very important question about. So what's next?
Yes.
I don't think I don't want to assume anything about this contract. I think
no, of course not.
we're all cognizant of the fact that we need to make sure the voter understands why this is a good idea to vote yes on the contract. It's why we're all here tonight, right?
Well, do you think the biggest stumbling block would be the 2-year part of it?
I think that anytime you're still in an economy that's struggling to recover and you're asking for a tax increase, you've got to make sure people know what they're paying for.
Well,
and that's what we're here trying to do. Is what these increases are going towards is making uncompetitive salaries or less than competitive salaries more competitive, and not making them the top salary in the state, but making them more competitive so that we can attract and retain.
What do you mean by not top salary in the state, Nate?
When you're going to be.
I think that it's important to know and to note that as a teacher in Bedford and the Teachers Association, we acknowledge there are non-economic reasons to teach in Bedford. And we have draws here that we don't have to have the top salary in the state at any point on the salary schedule in order to attract the top teachers, because we have great professional development, we have great collaborative teams, we have great culture in our schools.
Which is obviously not in existence in every school system.
And we've got great families that support the schools, and we've got a great community to work in. All those things are part of compensation.
True, but you still have to earn a paycheck and pay your own mortgage and put food on the table for your own kids and so on.
We have to set our salaries at a place where we can attract the top tier teacher. And that's the work that this contract does, and that's the work that the board and the association are going to sit down and do every time we sit at the table. We've come to some real great common understandings about when we come to the table, we're not a teachers union arguing for more benefits and more salary. We're a group of people coming together and saying, how do we make our schools great? And the way to make our schools great is to make sure we can get the greatest teachers in the classroom. Because I'm only as good as the teacher next to me. And so that's a common interest that we have with the school board. And so what's the next round of negotiations going to look like? Well, much to your chagrin, it's going to look like a whole lot of slides again, probably. But it's going to look at a whole bunch of data that we can generate. What are other districts doing on insurance? We need to look at that. What are other districts doing on salary?
What have they done on salary since the last time? And just so that everybody understands, we're very transparent about this process, Kathy, both with the teachers and with the community. We as a board, and we share this vision with the teachers. We don't feel a need to be salary leaders. We don't think that that's a great place to be. Let somebody else do that and spend that money. On the other hand, we're not going to be a trailer either. We target to be right around the bottom of the first quartile or the top part of the second quartile. So we want to be right around the 75th percentile for our peer districts. And we can talk about what we mean by peer districts, but right now, what we know is we're behind that, and so we're focused on closing those gaps and putting the money where those gaps are the greatest. And as we get more of that filled in, then the rate of increase will slow down. If we don't get it filled in, if the rest of our districts keep running, well, that's the competitive environment. You know, so then you can expect sort of more of the same. And so those are. You know, every time we sit down together, we're going to say, how are we performing as a district? How are we performing as an individual? But you know, what are the results that our students are getting? And there's very little question about the great results that we're getting. And then we'll ask what's happening in the competitive.
Which is when I opened up, I said I don't think it was any disenchantment with the teachers, or dissatisfaction. You know, I don't think that had a thing to do with it. One of the things I want to kind of come back to you on too is, last year we did the show a little bit differently. That you and I talked alone.
It was much
on the end of it. We were sitting there jarring. And one of the things, and I tried to emphasize it at the beginning of the show, and we talked about a little more at length, was the fact that this is not a union. It's a professional association. And to a lot of people, they need to hear that, because, I mean, sometimes, you know, if the national union comes in or whatever, they're kind of trying to dictate the terms, or they might be trying to set a test case or what have you. And that clearly is not the situation here in Bedford. This is a Bedford solution. The Bedford teachers reaching a solution with the Bedford School Board for the Bedford voters.
When many districts sit down and negotiate, as we have done for several months every year, there's lawyers involved. They could, if they chose to, New Hampshire NEA would send them a lawyer that work, and we would have a lawyer. But that's not the type of environment that we want to have. We want to have this working together, and that's the way it is. It's just the representatives from the BEA, and they have like a rep from each of the schools, so that they get the elementary and the middle and the high school, and they have some of the younger teachers, and then they have some of the more experienced teachers there, and they always have two school board reps, the superintendent and you know, the business administrator, and that's kind of what we do. We work together.
And I really do think people need to know that. Not to envision, you know, some union bosses coming and saying, well, this is what we're going to do in Bedford this year.
We we've come to an understanding over the last several years is, we went through a difficult time, and we've come out of that. And
it was very disappointing for the teachers, and I recognize that. I mean, it was a heartbreak for teachers.
But we took a different direction, and rather than digging in heels and bringing state or national representatives into negotiations, was to say we're going to deal with this as Bedford, and we're going to deal with Bedford issues locally with our association, because I don't think having two lawyers argue two different sides is the way to get the best education.
No,
and what the association is focused on, the best education here in Bedford. And so when you talk about the taxpayer that says, I don't worry about what other districts pay their teachers, or or so what if the teachers leave? I think what I would respond to is, all right, I understand that, and we're actually not worried all that much about what all those other districts are doing. We're worried about the quality of education here in Bedford, and we know that there are certain things we have to do on the economic side in order to maintain that quality, but we're not looking for more than that. We're not looking to be number one. We're looking to make sure we can hire the number one teacher, not pay the number one salary.
And there's nothing wrong with saying, and would also like to earn a decent pay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's a topic, and again, a year has passed since, and I mean it has been kind of an innovative idea. Has any other school district in the state kind of tried it this way?
You mean without the lawyers and without that? I'm not really sure.
Well, even just the way that this whole thing was put together. That you were targeting more the younger teachers for the the better pay raise and shifting a lot of the insurance costs and so on in return. I mean, it seemed like it was kind of a new thing here.
Right,
in New
we haven't
Hampshire.
spent a lot of time comparing notes with our peer districts in terms of what they're doing at the negotiating table. We've instead said, "What's your data? Well, tell us what your salaries are, tell us what your insurance rates are, and we'll sort of figure out what the patterns are and see where we measure up." So that I don't think that. I mean, you talked to other.
There's some. You could look at anecdotal evidence or case studies. I know that it's gotten more contentious between some associations and school boards.
Gosh, yeah.
Certainly, way more contentious than it's ever been in Bedford, and certainly gone in a different direction than we've gone as a group here. But again, we are more focused on not how their contracts are created, but what the result is once they're created, and how do we match up from a competitiveness standpoint. So if they kick and scream and have lawyers coming out with their contracts, that's their process. Our process is different.
And in the long term, I don't think that really works. All it does is fire everybody up and.
Right, and I think part of the answer is we're focused on the Bedford solution, on the local solution, and so we're not. We may compare notes to some extent with outsiders, but we don't. We're not looking so much to them to tell us how we should solve our issues here.
Well, I mean, as a total outsider, it sounded very innovative to me. And I mean, again, I'm not a school board member. I'm not a teacher.
We got.
I mean, you were creative. You recognized that things were at a logjam, pretty much.
Well, I think too. I mean, the whole feeling of this district, and I've been in this town almost 40 years now, and my children were educated here. It's always been, it's us. There's this, I think, working together. I mean, obviously we have the levels from the superintendent and the central office down to the leadership team and the administrators and the teachers and the parapros, and everybody is in it together. And I think that's the way the school board feels too, that we are all working together to make this the best for every single child in this district. And so many times if you have the lawyers banging out the deal, I think you lose that feeling. And we want win-win. We want the taxpayers to win. We want the school kids to win. We want the district to win. And we want to do it in a positive way. And I think it's just a reflection of everything about Bedford and us.
Well, I mean, it did seem to work last year. That's why when I raised the question to you, and again, I don't expect that you sit back complacently and just figure, okay, done deed, everybody's happy. No, of course not. You'll always have to state your case. But I mean, I don't think you have as hard a sell this year maybe as you did last year, when people were like, what are they talking about? What are they doing? And what's it going to cost us? I think It should, I mean, in my opinion, it should be easier this year.
I hope you are right, Miss Kathy.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it would seem
Well,
so.
and I hope if to the extent that we're not right, I hope that people reach out to us and contact us and look, because this is not just a single year event.
No.
This obviously is a, this is a path we've been looking at. It's a continuation of last year's contract. It's going to go on for 2 more years if it's passed. And those in the town who don't feel like we're headed in the right direction ought to get in there and participate in this process so that we are taking your views into account if you think we're not.
Well, they certainly have enough opportunity.
They do, and frankly, they also, there's, I think today's the last day if you're going to file, for...
Yeah,
it'll be
that's
too
the
late
other
by
end
the
of
time
it,
by the time they watch the program, but it's the last day to file for an opportunity to run for the school board, but people ought to be involved in that process.
Well, I'm looking at the clock, and it is winding down, so we have, a little over 3 minutes. I can close out real quick on my end of it. I guess what I'd say is, any or all of you, if you want to jump in, split the time, whatever, get that final message across to the people who are watching the show that you want them to know. Again, this show will air after the deliberative session, but it will air long before the election. So, now's a good chance to say to people, this is the deal. So I don't know, who wants to start?
You want to throw up slide 31 at the end? This is sort of a summary of bullet points of why we believe this agreement is worthy of your consideration. First, the results that the teachers are achieving in teamwork with the rest of the community, with the parents and the students. We recognize that teachers alone are not doing all this. On the other hand, the teachers are a significant component of the success that our schools are achieving, and those are numerical. The metrics are there. You can talk about them, but they're great results.
And not only just the numerics, not only the test scores, but I know I'm on the Bedford High School Senate and worked with other things. These kids and just kids I talk to, they're excited about school. They're excited about learning. I mean, there's all the words about lifelong learner and all this type of thing, but I think that's what so many of our teachers are doing. They're creating lifelong learners that they're excited to go to school, and they're excited about the new things they're learning.
That's important.
I think one of my main points it was the last bullet on that slide, which is about maintaining a culture of excellence. And it's not just a culture of excellence, it's that culture of collaboration which creates the excellence. We've got collaboration here as evidence between the school board and the association, but there's collaboration every day in the classroom among teachers and between teachers and students. And there's a huge component of that is collaboration between all of us educators and the community. And that's really what this contract represents, is collaboration for excellence.
Good way to put it.
I think it's a great place to end it. Everything else we've spent a lot of time on and gone over it, but it is something we've worked closely together on. I think it represents the best that the school board and the teachers have to put together. And I think it's a good way to support that culture of excellence that's been established here.
And of course, the good part of a two-year contract is that everybody doesn't have to go crazy again next year.
And everything that you ever read about New Hampshire, they say, natural resources. We don't have gas and oil and all those kind of stuff, and we pay a lot for those things. Our natural resource is our children. Our natural resource is our schools and developing the minds that carry us forward. And we are known as a state with a fairly highly educated population. That is the important thing that New Hampshire needs to look to the future with, and that's why it's important.
You're right about that. You're right about that. Well, look at that. We're on the clock. We did it. 4 people coming in right on time is a feat in itself. So.
You did a great job, Kathy.
Well, no, you guys did a great job. You're the ones who had to tell everybody about it. Well, okay. So again, we have had a good group here. I thank all of you for coming in, and feel free if you have more to talk about before the election, we can do this again. It's a matter of setting up the studio and doing it. And to all of you who are watching, I hope that you understand it all. I'm sure if you have any questions, you can give Tim Mays or any school board members a call, or for that matter, poor Nate, and and he can sneak out of the classroom or something. I don't know. But I know they're happy to answer your questions, and I know that they're very sincere and have worked hard on this. So, we don't have to fight this year. I think you can go to the polls and feel as though you know what you're voting on. And if not, then it's your own fault. You have plenty of time to learn, and you have plenty of time to ask questions. And if you don't, no complaining. Okay, so that's telling it like it is, and hope you'll keep doing it too. And until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.